Hi, my name is Paula Blackstein-Hirsch, and this webinar is about scorecards and ideal ways to display data for improvement. One of the key roles of a board and senior leadership is to oversee an organization's performance, and a scorecard is an ideal way to review on at least a quarterly basis these measures that relate to performance. If your organization already has a scorecard that's used to monitor your strategic plan, and you have a quality committee of your board, you may wish to create a separate quality scorecard. Once an organization develops its annual quality improvement plan, the scorecard is the vehicle for monitoring progress on that plan over time. So as I indicated, if you already have a scorecard linked to monitoring of progress of your strategic plan, it might look something like this. These are the traditional 4 quadrants of a Kaplan and Norton scorecard, where internal process focuses on really your core service delivery. Finance is exactly what it says, balanced budget, all kinds of financial indicators. Around capital, around working capital, all kinds of financial measures of that sort. Learning and growth generally relates to human resources, partnerships, IT, development, all kinds of things like that. Education, professional development, and if your organization does research, there may be some indicators included there for research. And then customer satisfaction or customer experience. The Excellent Care for All Act includes the 5 dimensions of quality that are listed in the blue. And these are generally the dimensions of quality that are included in an organization's quality plan. So if your organization doesn't already have a strategic plan and a corporate scorecard reflected in the pink, then you may just want to start with a quality scorecard using these 5 dimensions. If, however, your organization already has a corporate scorecard, and or if you only want to include one scorecard, even if you have a separate quality committee, I wanted to show you how what the alignment is like between these dimensions of quality and a traditional corporate scorecard. So the bottom 4 dimensions of quality, effective, safe, integrated, and accessible, actually align with the internal process quadrant of a traditional scorecard. These 4 dimensions of quality speak to core service delivery. Person-centered, on the other hand, links directly to customer satisfaction. So as I indicated, if you want to have 2 separate scorecards, you can use the 4 quadrants and then the 5 dimensions in 2. If you only want one and you already have an existing corporate scorecard, you can integrate these dimensions within the 4 quadrants in this way. And if you don't have an existing corporate scorecard, you may just want to start keeping a quality scorecard using these 5 dimensions. Just wanted to share with you, if you use both scorecards, how some organizations actually integrate certain measures into their corporate scorecard while they get to a more granular level with their quality scorecard. So if we focus on serious safety events as an example, that's sort of a very high level indicator that aggregates up likely several types of critical incidents. That might be what's being reported at the board, but if you have a quality committee, that committee might want to be focusing on specific types of critical incidents where there's a particular problem. Or you may just want to drill down and see those more granular indicators on a monthly or quarterly basis, so falls, infections, medication errors, etc. Similarly, you might be reporting overall client experience or willingness to recommend this organization at the board, but there might be a particular aspect of client experience, like client experience with care coordination, that there's a project attached to for improvement that the quality committee might want to be focused on. This is not to say that you can't have on your quality scorecard an indicator like falls resulting in harm and also report that at the board. But some organizations like to incorporate more aggregate indicators at their full board on their existing scorecard, and this is an example of a way to do that. This slide includes some sample indicators by dimension for your consideration. These are not common indicators that have been defined as yet for the sector. But if you have a quality scorecard that uses the 5 dimensions of quality reflected in the Excellent Care for All Act, these are just some examples of the types of indicators that you can include in each. I'm not going to spend time focusing on these during this webinar, but you have this slide for your own reflection. So let's take a look at some potential indicators and just see whether you can define or identify which dimension they'd fall into. And the reason for doing this is that if you're trying to think of indicators that would go under different dimensions of quality, if you're developing a quality scorecard for the first time, this short exercise should help you to think about which indicators are appropriate for the various dimensions. So let's start with number of days from referral to service initiation. Which of the 5 dimensions of quality would you put this into? If you selected accessible, you're correct. The number of days from one point in time to another point in time is always a wait time which reflects access to service. Let's take a look at the next one, client experience with continuity of service personnel. Which dimension would you place this one into? If you selected client experience, you're correct. Any indicator reflecting client experience, which would generally be derived from some type of client experience survey, would fall under the domain of quality of client experience. The next one, number of complaints. Which domain would you fit this one into? If you selected client experience, you're correct. Complaints are also a form of or a reflection of the client's perspective on service delivery. What about service denials? Where would you place this one? If you selected accessible, you're correct. This reflects a client's ability to access service or not, so falls under access. What about percentage of clients who follow a standardized protocol for home safety? If you chose safe, you're correct. This obviously links to improved safety. Take a look at percentage of clients with repeat visits to the emergency department. Where would this indicator go? Ideally, this indicator likely falls under integrated. The reason is that it's highly unlikely that your organization could be held solely accountable for improving this type of an indicator. It would be multiple organizations across sectors that would be working together, each in their own way, to impact this type of an indicator. There are some organizations that might think about putting this kind of an indicator under the effective domain. And it could be viewed this way because if your service delivery is indeed effective, you should be keeping people out of hospital. However, if this type of indicator is put under the affective domain, I'm not sure what type of indicator would go under integrated, and we do want a balanced set of indicators across these domains. I generally view any indicator that you would not want your organization to be held solely accountable for to be a good kind of indicator to put under integrated. Let's take a look at this final one. Percentage of clients whose level of functional independence is either maintained or improved. Which domain would you place this one into? I put this one under the affective column because a client is generally on service in order to achieve this type of goal. Consequently, if you were to ask yourself, how would we know if our service is effective? The results on an indicator like this should help to answer that type of question. So let's now move to guidelines for developing a scorecard. We've talked already about the types of scorecards that there are: a corporate type of scorecard, which monitors your strategic plan, and a quality scorecard that would monitor performance across those 5 dimensions of quality. And we've talked about the types of indicators that might fit within each of the dimensions of a quality scorecard. So the rule of thumb for a scorecard is that it include no more than 20 to 25 indicators maximum. And ideally, we want indicators, for the most part, where there's a gap between your current state and your target or your ideal state. And that's because we want to be monitoring indicators where we're looking for improvement. We want to focus on outcomes. By and large, to the extent possible, we should try to avoid putting process measures in a scorecard. We also want to ensure that the indicators are actionable. And in reality, there is still a need often to drill down on an indicator that's in a scorecard in order to take action. For example, for client experience, we often see an indicator like willingness to recommend this organization to others. If there was a low score on an indicator like this, you'd need to drill down on specific questions within the survey to determine exactly what was driving the low score, and therefore what you might want to do to improve it. Similarly, if you had an indicator like critical incidents, you would want to drill down to the underlying types of incidents to know exactly what kind of incident is driving that overall number of critical incidents. We want to balance across dimensions, so we don't want to optimize one area to the detriment of another, and that's the reason for having multiple dimensions. For example, we don't want to put all of our focus and attention on decreasing critical incidents and not pay any attention to the functional independence of clients. And finally, we want the indicators on a scorecard to align with strategy, whether that's your strategic plan and or the quality aims for your quality plan. And to the extent possible, we want to ensure that those indicators that you're required to report to external agencies like the province or the LIN or some other type of external accountability is only included on the scorecard if there's a gap between where you currently are and where you need to, what you need to achieve on those. Some organizations put any indicator that's externally reported on a scorecard, but there's no point in having 50 indicators, half of which are green every quarter, that just take the focus away from a group of people who are trying to focus on improvement. So I think that this tool on this, or this strategy outlined on this slide, is a way for helping to streamline the number of metrics that get onto a scorecard. The first thing that we want to do is ensure that any measure related to a high-level quality aim, so any outcome measure that would be in your quality improvement plan, on the left side, meaning if you're familiar with the template, it's an outcome measure for projects that you've got in play for the next year that you're trying to make improvement on. Any of those outcome measures should be on your quality scorecard. Additionally, any indicator that you're required to report externally, whether that's to on your EMSA, accreditation, or some other external body, the question that's helpful to ask is, are you outside an acceptable corridor or target? And if so, then it ought to find its way on the scorecard because you're trying to ensure that you can improve on it to get within an acceptable corridor. If you're already in that corridor, my suggestion is make someone accountable for monitoring it to make sure that you're not slipping, but don't put it on the scorecard. And finally, there might be just one or two or maybe three indicators that are just so important to your business, to your strategy, that you just feel that they always have to be on the board's radar, and so you're going to include them whether they're green all the time or not. So hopefully that will help you to streamline and think about decreasing the number of indicators that any senior group, including the board, is looking at a given point in time. So the display of data in a scorecard. Most people are certainly familiar with a colored dashboard, and I still recommend that that's a good front page or two of a quality scorecard. So where you've got the dimensions on the left side, you've got the indicator names, outcome indicators, baseline, your target, and then you're monitoring it at least quarterly, and those color codes reflect the extent to which you're achieving targets, which would be drilled down to a quarterly basis. Additionally, however, the gold standard for reviewing quality improvement data are looking at a line graph. This is called a run chart, and it allows us to look at data over time. The reason for this is that a snapshot on a dashboard can be very misleading, particularly when it's color-coded, but it can be very misleading, and there are not enough data points there to actually determine whether the change is resulting in improvement. On a line chart like this, however, you can actually start to ask some questions. You can predict what might be happening next, and you can actually identify when there's significant change for improvement. Please take note of the fact that we have two red median lines on this chart, as I'm going to reference the reason for this in a couple of slides forward. So let's take a look at some simple rules for interpreting run charts, or those line graphs. There are 4 rules that help determine when a change on a run chart reflects significant improvement or degradation, meaning the change was unlikely to have occurred by chance alone. Of the 4 rules, there are 2 that I'm going to review in this webinar that are most commonly used for improvement purposes. However, the other 2 will be summarized in a handout that will also be posted on the website with these slides. So rule 1 is called a shift. And we have a shift when there are 6 or more consecutive points that are either all above or all below the median, and values that actually fall on the median don't add to or break the shift. We just skip them and continue counting. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So on this graph, there is actually a signal of improvement, meaning a statistically significant change that would not have happened by chance alone. Inside that circle, there are actually more than 6 data points. There are actually 10 data points above that red median. Once you see some stability at this new level of performance, meaning about 10 or 12 data points altogether that are above or below the median line, you can actually set a new median at this new level and then try to start achieving improvement from this new level. The chart would look like the one that I showed you just 2 slides back, where I asked you to take note of the 2 red median lines. So one could actually take these data and calculate a new red line or a new median for the data points that are included within this circle and start from there. The second rule is called a trend, and a trend is 5 or more consecutive points all going up or all going down. If the value of 2 or more consecutive points is the same, we ignore one of the points and continue counting. Note the starting point doesn't count. Also note that either there is a trend, meaning 5 data points, or there is not. There is no such thing as trending. And the reason that we note this is that some people will develop a line graph in Excel and allow the Excel to automatically include a trend line. This trend that I'm talking about on this slide denotes statistical significance. But when Excel puts a trend line on, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is statistical significance. So strictly speaking, when that's done in Excel, it's misleading. A true trend is when the data meet this rule on this slide. Let's take a look at what this looks like on an example. So the data points in this circle, if you count them up, starting at the first one that's fully in this circle, there are actually about 8 data points until the data start going down again. Remember that we don't count the first one, so we start at the second one here, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sixth one is at the same level, so we don't count it, and then we go to the next one, which is 7. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 data points within this circle. So it's still greater than 5. 5 or greater represents a trend. As I indicated, we're not going to spend time on the other 2 rules, but they're delineated in a handout that's also on the website for you. These 2, a shift and a trend, are the most commonly used. So now let's let you take a turn at interpreting, looking for one of these 2 rules. On this graph, take a look at it and determine whether there's a signal of significant change, meaning is one of those 2 rules met? And secondly, are the data moving in the right direction? I'll give you several seconds to take a look at it. So if you selected a trend, you're correct. Starting with this data point at September 2010, we count the number of data points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all generally going up. We subtract the first one, we don't count the first one, and we also subtract this one that's at the same level. So again, we're left with 5 data points going consecutively up in the same direction. We just don't count the first one, and we skip this one at the same level. Also, these data are not moving in the right direction. We can see that the target is 10, and in this case, down is good, and the data are actually going up. So if you were advising a team, you'd want to find out what's been put into place, attempting to reverse this and how well it's actually being implemented, and then seeing whether there might be something else going on at the same time as your project to determine what might be causing this trend. Let's take a look at this next one and determine if there's a signal of significant change, i.e. are one of those 2 rules met, and are the data in fact moving in the right direction. if you picked 1C, then you're correct. This represents neither a shift or a trend. And the data are basically staying the same. So they're not really moving in any direction because there isn't a shift or a trend. It's random variation around the median. Now take a look at this one and determine if there's a signal of significant change and determine whether the data are moving in the right direction. So this graph reflects a shift. The last 6 data points on the right of this graph are all above the median line. So that's statistically significant change. And the data are moving in the right direction, but they're not yet achieving target. So you'd want to advise the team to continue doing what they're doing. Maybe they don't have enough change ideas in place yet. And maybe it is that they don't have all staff implementing the new change ideas yet. So they're moving in the right direction, but not yet at target. So just to summarize what we've covered in this webinar, the quality dimensions from the Excellent Care for All Act that can be used in a quality scorecard are aligned with the internal process and customer satisfaction quadrants of a traditional corporate scorecard that many organizations will use to monitor progress on their strategic plan. There are many outcome indicators that align with each of the 5 Excellent Care for All Act dimensions of quality. But that said, organizations should include no more than 20 to 25 indicators in any scorecard, and these should be balanced across the dimensions included in the scorecard. Line graphs, either in the form of run charts or statistical process control charts, are the best method for displaying data for improvement. Good luck as you develop scorecards and start to develop indicators and monitor data using run charts for interpretation.